Hi everybody, we're here today with my guest Steve Nicholas, and he is representing his new firm that he's just started up, SMN Development Support, and we're going to have a little bit of a chat about kind of what that's all about, and then go on to maybe some of your goals for the next kind of 1 to 5 years, and then maybe some of the challenges you have. So tell us a little bit about what actually SMN Development is.
Yeah, no, thank you. I will do. Actually, I've tweaked it already because I've now called it SMN Planning and Development Support, just to tweak it slightly.
With that fresh off the press.
Yeah, fresh off the press, absolutely. People have confused what I do with either being a PR consultant or a communications consultant, and I'm trying to really simplify what my offering is, hence calling it Planning and Development Support.
Yeah.
So my task is to help anyone with a planning application in the built environment to land that planning application more softly. They all have a duty to engage with the local community, with all the stakeholders, with residents. It's very easy to find objections to planning applications. In fact, you don't need to go finding them because they find you. It's not so easy to find the support. Obviously, house building is a massive topic for the government now. Accelerating house building is key. And so my job is to, my firm, my consultancy, is to help anyone with that planning application find support for their project to make the process of the planning application easier to land once it gets to committee.
Yeah, okay. So you kind of rebranded so that it's a bit clearer about what you do, because I guess the word development is a bit subjective if you're just looking at that isolating, so that's quite good. I'm quite a big fan of keep it simple, just tell people what you do. So, but essentially what we're saying is that you've got a planning consultant, like an architect or something, they go in for planning, and what your role in it, for those that don't quite understand that, is to assist with that planning process, so to engage with local residents and kind of do that extra touch that isn't just like that kind of office-based thing where they're just literally bunging in a planning application and hoping for the best.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head there in the sense that I work as part of the project team, so I work alongside the planning consultants and the architects that are in the project team working for the client. I complement what they do because they do the technical side of it, if you like, and the policy side of it, where the planning consultants are concerned for the planning policy. What I do is the touchy-feely bits, if you like. Essentially, finding that support, lining it up and teeing it up in the right order. Because I think that with engagement, it's if you engage early, then you've got a much better chance of people understanding and relating to your project, rather than if they hear about it just as you go to planning, and there's been no engagement and they've not had any awareness of this project, and their heckles go up at the back of their neck. So we're encouraging clients to engage as early as possible so that you take people along that journey with you and they understand what it is you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, okay. So it's like a kind of hands-on version of sometimes they call those community halls and stuff, don't they, when they invite the local residents in for kind of a Q&A with a developer or something.
Yes,
you're way before that event happens.
Well, although I will organise those events and facilitate those events, but actually I'm trying to get away a little bit from those traditional physical engagement events, because the problem with those is that if you have a village hall, when you put up your exhibition boards, the people that come along to those engagement events typically are the ones who are against it anyway, who want to raise an objection, who want to moan at the project team, if you like. And I'm here to try and find support. So we're trying to be a bit more innovative about how we go about finding support for people, because we need to engage with a different demographic. We need to get younger people involved in the planning process so they understand it, because actually building more houses will mean more to those younger people who want to get on the ladder.
Because they've got quite a big target. I mean, they always seem to have a big target, to be honest. So I guess if you can get those younger people more engaged and understanding of it, because nobody wants what's the newbie thing, not in my backyard thing going on. That's like not a new thing really. I mean, I remember that from being a kid. Nobody really wanted the Amex Stadium to go where it was or anywhere else. Amex Stadium being local to Brighton where we're based, for those of you who are not around here watching the video. But it's like that in any town though, really, isn't it? And nobody really wants development or anything because it's change.
No, absolutely. But I think that's where people very rarely understand the process of what's going on around them. So, I mean, for example, when was the last time anyone read their own local plan? Because actually what is going to be developed and the land that's going to be developed is usually contained in that local plan. The problem is a local plan is often years, has been produced years earlier. So by the time that the bricks come out of the ground and people start seeing these buildings being developed, they've got no idea that actually this was planned for 5 or 6 years earlier. And we need to make that whole process much simpler for people to understand, for people to be able to access local plans and understand exactly what they mean to them.
So what kind of brings you to this point in life? Like, what's your journey that brings you to this point? Like, you didn't just like kind of leap into doing this and wake up one day and go, I'm going to help developers ease the pain of getting planning permission. So what was the journey up to here?
Well, you're suggesting that wasn't my dream from when I was a young child.
Well, generally speaking, most people want to be footballers or something like that when they're kids.
That was an aim, but I quickly realised I wasn't good enough very, very quickly. I spent about 30 odd years in property. I was business development director for Mission McKay Estate Agents, so big Brighton and Hove independent firm. I enjoyed my time in property. Alongside of that, I've been a district councillor and now a parish councillor as well, but a district councillor for the last 4 years, and I was cabinet member on Ada District Council for regeneration and strategic planning. And that's kind of what's led me to where I am now. I really enjoyed that role. I really enjoyed the responsibility of the regeneration and planning in Ada District, or having responsibility for it. But it frustrated me that developers that were coming forward with their plans were not very good at engaging with residents. I was receiving the flack from residents, being the politician responsible, and I could see these developers and house builders just really not doing a very good job at talking to the people who this was going to affect. And that's really what's led me in this direction. So I've been doing it for the last couple of years with a different firm, and recently, within the last 2 or 3 months, launched my own consultancy because I'm very keen to go in a certain direction myself.
Yeah, okay. And I suppose to touch on that kind of direction, what led you to be, because you were in a consultancy, PAYE or maybe self-employed, I don't know, but and then you've kind of taken that move to just be on your own consultancy. What sort of drove that, I suppose? I
think really the desire to be able to plot my own path, my own direction. I felt probably a little bit restricted in giving my thoughts and opinions without having the independence to go off and put some of those things into play. And so now the direction I want to go in means that I can plot that chart myself. And I'm so far, on the whole, I'm enjoying working for myself, but finding it an interesting process.
So, I mean, in terms of the business, they kind of strike me like very suited to that kind of freelancey type industry, if you like, or kind of setup. I suppose if you're going to sort of, I mean, I'm assuming you're looking to grow it a little bit. Some of the things that we've looked at and your thing, you want to kind of work on the business, not in it so much, that kind of stuff. So geographically, what's the kind of scope? Because obviously locally it's quite, very people person, and you could do a lot of work in Brighton, but it strikes me that a lot of kind of consultancy, freelance type industries or jobs, they do struggle to like grow if they kind of just in that kind of local town, really. I don't know kind of what area you're envisaging covering really, or the whole of the UK maybe, or the world, who knows, I don't know.
I'm not
You tell me.
I'm not looking to conquer the world. No, I've been there, tried that before, failed, so no, I'm not going down that route again. I think if I was to try and be too parochial and really concentrate on one town, for example, then I'd quickly run out of work, frankly. So, no, I mean, essentially the southeast corner, if you like. But even then, I'm not... Sussex, Surrey, Hampshire, Kent is really where I'm concentrating. And I've got, for example, I've got projects that are out in Rye at the moment. So as far east as I'm going at present, I am talking to a prospective client about a job in Hampshire. I've got a meeting with them in the diary next week, for example. I've got something going on in Littlehampton. I've got a couple of projects in Brighton. I've got one up in the Lewis district as well. And actually, I've just been talking to somebody today about one on the Surrey Kent border. Okay. That corner really, that southeast corner.
Yeah. Okay. And a different type of question, I suppose, but what were you like as a young lad then? So like that kind of curious Steve between those age of like 12 to say 20 or something. What
I was wondering
that?
How young we were going to go there.
Not too young, but like, that kind of like where you're developing into like yourself really. What were you like?
Well, do you know what? I think I was always described as being a bit sort of slightly old for my time actually when I was younger, because I was I should have done better at school than I did. I was I did okay with my O-levels. I chose some terrible A-levels, and I'm dating myself here with O-levels, I realise that, but I chose some terrible A-levels and they didn't really go very well for me. I wanted to go to university but didn't. I ended up taking a job at 17, not finishing sixth form, so going straight into the workforce, because a lot of my mates had done that. They hadn't gone out to uni, they'd all were earning money and starting to go down the pub at the weekend and et cetera, et cetera. And I was also into politics at an early age. So, I stood for local council, I think when I was 19 years old the first time round. Actually took a break from it and came back to it in later years and have been more involved much more recently. But equally, I love my sport. I mean, I was always in the football team, either the school football team and youth football teams, and then I ran my own Sunday league side for many years, and played Saturday football as well. So football was my passion. I'm a massive Brighton fan.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's quite a common theme. A lot of people, they don't do the formal education route. That's quite common, like in this sort of entrepreneurial, freelancey type space, really. Some people do it, but quite often when I talk to podcast guests, they like left school early, or they got their GCSEs or their A-levels and then didn't go to uni, or dropped out of uni or something like that in the pursuit of the kind of school of life, if you like.
Yeah, and I think that was me. I mean, I worked for Norwich Union Life Insurance Society at 17. Yeah. Met some really good friends there who remained friends, throughout my life, and then went into a estate agency for quite a chunk of my career. And now I've come out of agency, but still, I sort of see myself as being part of that property built environment industry. Yeah. Although it's not just residential I'm looking after now; it's commercial, it's education, sports pitches, emergency temporary accommodation, even with one client. So. Okay.
Well, I suppose that kind of brings me nicely on to your kind of 1 to 5 year plans, and let's have a little look at some of your kind of goals for the foreseeable future. So what we've got here is you've got what are your goals for your kind of year one in your business. I know it's a fairly fresh business. So to be the go-to stakeholder engagement consultant in Sussex. So I suppose that's your kind of year one thing. What's the competition like? Because it's quite a bespoke industry, isn't it? Like I only know you doing this, so maybe my experience is quite small, but I don't know how much competition you have.
No, that's fair. I mean, it is quite niche, and actually it's been born out of the fact that the changes that the government have made to the National Planning Policy Framework, for example, that talk about if your application has proactive and effective engagement, you've got a much better chance of approval. So it's kind of been born out of that, really. I originally said to be the go-to stakeholder engagement in Sussex, but I think I don't know. I have no desire to as we said earlier, I have no desire to rule the world. I'm not looking to build an empire. I just want to provide a really good service and an option for people who understand that engaging properly will not only help their projects, but will also help the community and the stakeholders understand more about that project. So effective communication, I guess, to just try and make sure that people are trying to pull in the same direction rather than, I mean, in terms of what is the competition like, to answer that question, I mean, there are others that do what I do, not many, and equally not many who I think are being quite as transparent or specific about the type of offering that I bring to the market, if you like. I think a lot of people in this industry that do similar roles to me are maybe offering slightly, or trying to offer a wider remit, if that makes sense, in terms of covering off public relations or PR consultancy or public affairs as well. And as I say, I want to be a bit more nuanced than that and support the built environment industry.
Yeah. Okay. So I suppose you've got this kind of business. It's a fairly niche part of the market. You've got a little bit of competition and the rest of it. How do you educate people to understand what you do and why that is needed so that you can become the kind of go-to person, I suppose? Because ideally, it strikes me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but really what you want to be is the sort of BMW of this niche market. So you kind of, maybe not taking over the world, you're not producing the most vehicles or cases in your industry, but the ones that you are quality and they're kind of bespoke, and you're being transparent about it. You know what you're kind of getting. Like, it's a good level of service. So that's kind of maybe where your USP is, if you like, that kind of BMW of this sort of industry. So how are you going to become the go-to, or how are you going to kind of what's the kind of USP that you're going to sell people, or what's the plan for getting that message out there? Because I guess I asked the question because it strikes me like, I think we touched on it before, is that people probably don't really understand what you do, I suppose. How are you going to educate people that this is a good part of their planning strategy?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question, because people don't Google what I do. You don't search for planning and development support consultancy. Although I think most house builders, construction companies, people that are putting in a tricky application understand that if they've got some support behind their project, there's a better chance of it being successful. Yeah. So I think most of the clients that I end up working with realise that this would be useful for their project. It's whether they've budgeted for it at the outset. And that's the bit that to convincing clients that actually this will save them money rather than cost them money, because if they get their engagement right, better chance of getting it through first time rather than going to appeal and spending a lot of money on appeal fees and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So what I'm doing is spending a lot of time navigating a bit of networking, which is, and that's not necessarily to go networking to sit with somebody and win a contract. That's not how it works. But it's just for people to understand that the service I provide is out there. And again, simplifying what I do. And I'm finding that I'm getting introductions from people who have spoken to somebody I've spoken to at networking, for example, and said, I've spoke to X, who said to me, you might better help me. Yeah. And I've had a couple of introductions in the last week to 10 days, for example. Now, they might not come to anything, but I've got meetings in the diary with these people to sit down, talk through how I can help them, and whether there's something we can work on together as a result. Yeah. And equally, I'm also doing the rounds of planning consultants, architects, and house builders to make sure that they understand my USP. And I think my USP, to answer that question, is that I see things from both sides of the fence. Being a district councillor and being a previous cabinet member for regeneration means I understand how the elected politicians are thinking, but I also know what the residents and the community are thinking, because I am a resident and a member of the community myself. So I think I can tread that line to be able to give my clients some really good advice that says, look, this is this is the best way of approaching this engagement. This is how we're going to find the support for you.
So I suppose just thinking back to what you said about the kind of, your house builder and your architect, and then you've got the other end of the market, which is Susan and David, who've got a house and they want to build an extension. They're arguing with their neighbour. I'm assuming that end of the market is not really your kind of remit, because they probably won't see the value in it. They'd probably rather just take on their neighbour and have an argument about it and end up in some tribunal or a hearing. And they probably don't have the money or see the value in engagement with them and sending you round. So your kind of ideal client, I suppose, is introductions from architects, who might be working with a client and they say, look, there's going to be a bit of a backlash on this one. I suggest you use someone like Steve to go around and do this. Or a house builder who might say, look, we don't want our brand tarnished. Like, we work with lots of developers where they build stuff and then they give us to manage it afterwards. But I know from their experience during the initial stages, they probably could have done with a service like this, because they've actually ended up falling out with the local community, and then it gives their brand like a poor image. They get bad Google reviews, they get people just being negative for the sake of it, and it does impact them as a business. So presumably that end of the market is more where you'll kind of see your growth a bit, rather than trying to aim at your Susan-y type.
I'm just wondering if you want a job as my marketing consultant, because you've pretty much nailed that. I mean, I use the Susan and David analogy I use regularly in order to describe what I do. So, for example, if you were going to do, as you say, if you're going to do an extension on your home, actually the first people you talk to after your partner are your neighbours.
Yeah.
And that's engagement. You are talking to your neighbours, because if your builder just rocks up and starts, making a lot of noise and creating a lot of dust, and you haven't told the neighbours, then they're going to be not happy with you. So that's exactly why you talk to your neighbours. You sign a party wall agreement. But you're right; those people probably don't need me. That's engagement they can do themselves.
Or they might need you, but they might not see the value because they're not commercially minded.
Yes,
as well. Like you could aim at your service at them, but what I'm trying, I suppose, in my experience, Susan and David are harder to convince that they need your services.
Yes, I think that would be fair, and I would think that if they've got good relationships with their neighbours, if we're being really honest, they probably don't need my services, because they probably can do that engagement themselves, as long as they're not not trying to build something that is complete monstrosity that they're never going to get planning for anyway. But yeah, so you're right. I mean, my projects, I think the smallest project I've got at the moment on is 5 units. And the biggest project I've got on at the moment is 140 units. But I've done larger projects than that in the past. That's the market I'm aiming for, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that the 140 units is considerably more profitable bottom line than your units of 5. I know there's a case for having both in your business, because you've got to have cash, easy money coming in and flowing in, and then you've got to have those bigger things. But presumably the profit margins or end result is a lot higher the bigger the development size, really, isn't it? Because the engagement's going to be a lot more complicated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the bigger the project, the more engagement that's required. Yeah. And that's a particularly complicated project because it's on multiple different sites as well. So it's that's an interesting one. But it's one that requires a bit of nuance.
So, what do you do to get in front of the architects, other than and the builders, other than just say, going around the networking events like the trade shows or whatever it might be, or turning up to the breakfast meetings? What are you actively doing to get in front? Because it strikes me like they're your kind of preferred introduction, if you like. So what's the kind of strategy there?
Yeah, I think most architects and planning consultants are involved in projects at quite an early stage. So they're the ones who can talk to the client about a requirement or a need or what value I can bring to the project. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Making sure that I'm in regular contact with architects and planning consultants. Now, I've got a number that are within my network circle already, which is great, and people that are already referring to me, and then word of mouth as a result. I had a meeting with a planning consultant this morning prior to coming here, and that was really keeping my fingers crossed. It could be quite a productive meeting because actually what she was really pleased to see the proposition and the type of work that I'm aiming at, and my flexibility and how I intend to operate. And actually, she talked to me about one or two projects that she's got in mind already that she thinks I might be able to help with. And would I come back and present to her director and maybe the wider team, so they've got a wider understanding of the type of services I can bring to their projects.
Yeah.
So that word of mouth, once I do a good job for one, they will typically introduce me to other colleagues in the industry, or I can refer to case studies that I've worked on previously and approach other architects and planning consultants in that manner.
Yeah, I was going to ask about case studies, because I think that's quite a good way of you getting in front of those new architects and clients, not the existing kind of network. Obviously, you can pull upon that. But if you're, say, like, right, I'm going to write to, there's 50 architects within my kind of local geographic area that I want to write to. We get loads of letters here just all the time going, hi, we're an architect, we're an accountant, da, da, da. And the ones that stick out are the ones that actually come in like a packet or a parcel, or they've got something meaty, or they do things like put it in a brown envelope, and then it's the stuff that actually sticks out. Because to be honest with you, we have a system here where basically it comes in, it gets opened. If it's just a touting letter, it goes in the bin, and unless it's something, it's got a pen inside it, or it's come in a shoe box or something or other, or something distinct really. And then that way it gets across the table of the right people. It may not go any further than that, but I feel like those ones are more successful, and we've kind of done that. Sent out like kind of marketing letters to developers and the rest of it, and been like, this is some case study things and stuff. I think they're quite good things to pull upon. If you're trying to attract like that new wider audience, if you like. Because I think even your developers, especially the builder type, maybe the ones that have done lots of simple, large sites that have been non-contentious, probably still don't understand. Even they may not understand exactly what the purpose of this service is or what it is. So if you can get across to them, I think they might go, well, actually it's an easier ride. I don't really want to deal with all the residents and all the planning meetings and the rest of it. Actually, I've got other things going on. So like our client that I said that got backlash, they probably would have been like, actually for a small fee would have been brilliant for them, because it would have protected their brand reputation as much as, probably not chewed up so much of their own time as well.
Yeah, no, I think, again, absolutely right. I think if I'm approaching anybody, whether it's architect, planning consultant, house builder, construction company, whoever it might be, I will always try and make my contact as bespoke as possible. So I don't have a one-size-fits-all marketing letter or, that goes out. I will pick something that is particularly pertinent to them. It might be, I might reference a scheme that I've already seen them working on, or I might talk about a location that I know that they've operated in, and refer to somebody that I've got who's a contact who might have been able to help with that project, or I might refer to a contact who I know they've worked with before. And so I will always try and personalise and make it as bespoke as possible, so that they understand that I've got contacts, connections, but also, that I can operate in their world, if you like, and therefore I can bring value to what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's really important, if I'm honest, like to try and get in front of those people, those bigger clients or the wider network. You just need to make sure whatever you're sending them or getting them is really bespoke to them and gets their attention, because it's just a sea of stuff. Like email mail outs are pointless nowadays. It's mostly junk mail. I mean, probably from your own emails you get like 90% of it's rubbish, to be honest with you. It's junk mail. People stop posting stuff out nowadays, or if you've got to sign for it before it comes in, it gets a little bit of attention. Okay. I think like that's kind of like on the right track, and I think that we can, we should be able to work with that and kind of expand from there. But I think it's important to get in front of those, because you need because it's quite a niche. You need like a lot of contacts, if you like, to feed the business, because cash is king, isn't it, coming in? So
particularly in the early stages.
Yes, definitely, yeah. And I know we spoke off camera about like invoicing and stuff like that. And as you know, sometimes people will want long payment terms and things like that, or not pay you. And there's ways around that and stuff, which we can maybe touch on later. But yeah, cash in the bank account is king, really, isn't it? So.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on to your kind of more longer term things, like your 3 to 5 year plans, is to get your work-life balance right, so that you continue to work hard on your business, but considered an expert in your field, but able to enjoy your life without feeling guilty about doing so. So it's kind of moving more towards that working on the business, not in it necessarily, and having a bit more kind of good work-life balance. Do you see that as growing it to a point where you're not involved in the day-to-day, or do you see it as in like, I've got a nice amount of clients that are consistent and reliable, and I'm happy with it at this size because it's only like 3.5 days a week worth of work? Which because a lot of people actually just want the latter, or the latter option, which is just like, I'm just happy I've got like 8 key clients that keep giving me work, and I can do that till I'm 65 and retire, and it's only 3.5 days a week. Or some people want to grow the business so that they're not involved in the operational side day to day, and they're kind of just more strategically looking at where the business is going in itself.
Yeah, no, I've had a business previously where I had 19 staff, and that is quite a responsibility. Having 19 people to pay at the end of the month is something that doesn't always sit too comfortably. And so this time around, no, I'm not looking to grow exponentially potentially. I think I would much rather be considered an expert in my field who people can call on, and I've got that regular bank as you mentioned. I mean, actually having a regular bank really for me is more about a regular bank of people that are going to refer to me, because the projects are finite projects.
Yeah.
I'm lucky if projects last more than 6 to 9 months. Sometimes they're shorter than that, and they might only need me for 3 or 4 months. I've got one client that I'm pitching for, which could be 18 to 24 months. Now that would be a game changer for me, because that would be something nicely sitting there in the background, whilst my other small to medium projects are ticking over as well. So having that, I think the latter. I'm not sure about the 3.5 days a week yet. I'm not not quite ready to scale that far down. Although that work-life balance is something that people refer to regularly. I mean, I don't. I will answer emails.
Yeah.
If I'm around and I've got an email that comes in at 7:30 in the morning and I've seen it, I'll respond to it rather than waiting until 9:30 to respond to it. And likewise, if I'm sitting there in the evening and I see one come in at 7:30, 8 o'clock, if it makes sense to respond quickly, then I'll do so. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it's better to reflect on it and actually give it some thought and go back to it when you've done that the following day, because not everybody expects you to respond within 5 or 10 minutes. But it's about getting that balance right, really. But importantly, as long as I've got people that are referring to me because they think that Steve is the one who will roll his sleeves up and go and actually get things done for you and find that support and make your life easier for your project, that's the reputation I want to build.
Yeah. With the business model, so you've got these like, I'm not necessarily meaning like 3.5 days a week. It could be like, I'm only working 6 hours a day, so I'm not doing a full like 8-hour day or something like that. So it's spread across the week. But with those kind of key clients that are kind of feeding in, does it run the risk of being a little bit of sort of feast and famine? I mean, I'm thinking like, say the property market's booming, everyone's building, and then something happens, a COVID, a recession, financial crash, and then it's kind of turned a little bit off overnight for a period of 2 or 3 years. I don't know kind of how that sort of model fits, because obviously you've got like this very reliant upon people continuing to do planning stuff, isn't it? So you could end up in this kind of feast and famine type arrangement, or maybe long periods of time where you're doing work and not getting paid for it or something. Is there any danger of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, there's a risk of that. I mean, I think the way I'm trying to structure my invoicing might help to mitigate that a little bit. I mean, I will work out with a client how they want to pay me. But typically what makes life easier for me is if we agree a project fee, But if I'm invoicing them monthly for the work I've done each month, then that means I've got some regular cash flow coming in, all the time. Some clients will say, well, can we pay you 25% at the outset, 25% in the middle, and then 50% at the end? But again, as long as I work with clients and understand how that's working. Feast and famine. I think the key thing as well here is to remember that it's not just a residential development I'm working on.
Yeah.
So there is always that. There's always commercial applications going in. There's always clients like my emergency temporary accommodation client, for example. They've always got applications going in on what they're doing and expanding their business. Let's hope that doesn't happen. I can understand why you asked the question, because there is a risk that if we hit a major recession or something and all of a sudden interest rates go through the roof and, house building...
Something happens, whatever it might be.
Absolutely. And it's, we've been there before.
Yeah.
So I understand why that could be an issue. Again, I suppose it's about me, as quickly as possible, getting up to a run rate that means that I can see 6 months into the future all the time. Yeah. And I guess if that's starting to drop off, then they're the early warning signals.
Yeah. I suppose it comes from, I have a kind of want and a passion. I quite like recurring income, and I don't know if there's any sort of services that you could provide that are like recurring and you don't have to kind of start again every single month with them. Like if someone, let's say that disaster happens and they go, right, you go, right, like my client wants to pay 25% now, 25% or I'm going to bill them monthly, and then the disaster happens and they just go, we're cancelling everything, then the rest of the money won't come in, will it? Because they'll cancel, they'll settle up with you, and then that's the end of the project. But if there was maybe some sort of residual kind of, I don't know, I'm struggling a little bit to think of what it could be, and you probably know a bit better than me, but for example, if there was, you could work with architects and be like, look, I can be retained at a price of £100 a month, and you can just literally just send me stuff and go, do you think this is contentious or not? Do you think we would need your services? And then the architects are like, what we've done is we've bolted that onto the price we're paying our client, so it's not necessarily costing them, it's part of their service. But you're getting this retainer of like £100 a month, whether you're called on or not, but they can kind of send you like 3 or 4 projects for you to look at and go, to be honest, that's Susan and David, I wouldn't get involved with that, just leave them to argue with their neighbours, or that's going to be contentious. I know it's only 3 units, but it's like going up and then digging a hole, and it's very close to this I don't know, whatever community service centre or something next to it. Like, even though it's small, I think you probably would benefit from that. I don't know if that's a sort of a possibility, because then you've got kind of drip feed of income coming in, which is a small amount, but if you've got a small amount from a lot of people and you can build that up so it covers your kind of base running costs of the business or your wages or whatever, then that's quite a nice position to be in should the taps get turned off momentarily.
Absolutely. And I think actually the key thing there is that those referrers, if you like, are adding value to what they do by using you as, but they will say to their client, look, we're not saying you need engagement, but what we're saying is we've got somebody who will take a look at this for us as part of our fee. And if there's a need for engagement, we'll come back to you with a proposal. If not, then we'll honestly say to you, don't worry, we think we're good to go. I think that's an interesting.
If you take like your standard architect, it'll go, right, we want $4,000 for doing, like, let's say it's a plot of land, they're going to build a house on it or something like that. That's Susan and John's thing. And the fee's $4,000 or something like that. If they said the fee's 4,100 or 200 or something, but it covered your fee for looking at it, and part of their package, like a USP for them, is that we will get a specialist to look at it and tell you whether we need some local engagement or whether or not it's probably going to be okay. That's just rolled into the fee. By the time you spent $4,000 or 4,100 or 200, it's all going to be the same amount of money. But for you, it's the ability to just quickly look at it for £100 and just go, yeah, I think so, or I wouldn't really worry about it too much. And then that way, then that report can go back to their client. They can make a decision on it because you can give them option A and option B on anything, because they still might want to engage anyway, because they might not want to upset their neighbours. And then you've got that kind of £100 coming in regularly on pretty much every single project that they're sticking through the door, really, then, aren't they?
Yeah, no, I think that's eminently sensible. And I think I guess the only I suppose the danger with architects in particular is whether they are commercially minded enough to offer that as a service. And I don't mean to.
I think you need to aim at your architects that are fairly well established of a reasonable size, where you've got the owners probably working on the business, not necessarily in it anymore. They might not have even done any drawings or planning for a while, what they're strategic. So like those businesses that have got kind of 12 plus staff, they're the ones that probably are churning out enough to be like, do you know what, if we just bolt this onto our service, and then, because we can pay you 100 quid and we know you're going to do 3 of them, and we can charge 100 quid a client, so they're going to make 200, you're going to make 100, it's probably 5 minutes work for you to look at it and give your initial thought on it. And it's a very small percentage onto the bill. You're talking like a £4,000 bill, what's that, like £400 would be 10%, wouldn't it? So you're talking like 2.5% extra. So and it will make their quote stand out against the other architects as well. So they all go in at £4,000, and you go, there's an extra thing you can do here. It's my initial thoughts of something you could do. I'm sure there are other things, but I just those little drip feed things into your business do help you weather the storms a little bit.
Add-ons if you like, but
and it's a good easy in with them as well, because if you constantly do that, and then occasionally they go, someone's selected that they do want to, take up your services, you do it, and then it's all bolt on to their services. They might increase their turnover, they might add a bit onto your fee or whatever, and you're working directly for the architect rather than the client, so you're less likely to get sort of done over, if you like, in theory.
Absolutely.
Businesses do it to each other.
I'm assuming you don't want commission for the suggestion.
No, I'm fine. It's all free. I just find it really interesting, and there's no right or wrong answer to any of it. But I see lots of businesses that do like that. They're really reliant upon a few customers, and then the taps get turned off, and then they've got no money coming in, and that's quite common. That especially in that kind of freelance or small space or whatever. Like we had a lady in who was doing massages and stuff like that, and she wanted to expand into like scented candles that actually melt down into the oil that you do the massage in. So like and scents and stuff, and she was really like trying to get away from like being totally reliant upon the massage people, because they come and go, like they do their they pay for like 10 in advance, they finish their 10 and then they're gone. You've got to now find another client to come in and do another bulk of 10 massages. So there's always this kind of constant drive to drive money into the business and get new customers. But if she starts up this other little business, it's going to drip feed some income in for the odd client she loses, or maybe some downtime. So
absolutely.
She's looking to just smooth out the peaks and troughs, basically.
Excuse the pun,
So, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be that, but that's something that just sprang to mind. And there may be other things that you can think of, but I think those sort of things are quite good, because they will allow you to not have to hunt all the time for it, and get closer to that kind of, it's comfortable. And I don't need to chase it all the time, and I can become that kind of,
absolutely. It makes absolute perfect sense.
So I think that those things would be incredibly useful for ironing out those kind of peaks and troughs. But your longer term goals, obviously, they're a bit harder. But I always say to people they can probably achieve more in 10 years than they can in a year. Like they overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate in 10 years. And I know you kind of, not everybody always gets the thing right, but you put in the 10 years to be on the golf course more often and do some more travelling, which obviously is akin to your 3 to 5 year goal of kind of just having that nice work-life balance, really. So, I would just try and do those things in order to kind of make sure the business is kind of self-sustaining and ticking over a little bit. That always leads to a much easier work-life balance, because you're not having to chase stuff all the time. So hopefully you can get out on the golf course and do all of that sort of stuff. And even if you go, right, I'm going to do 4 days a week, or I'm only ever going to work 8 till 2 every day, that's all I ever do. Those are good goals to have. But again, what you don't want to be doing is like, I have to work till 4 or 5 today because I have to get this client, because if I don't get it, we're going to struggle a bit this month.
No, absolutely. I mean, you talked about You talked about football earlier on, and golf was always the thing that was supposed to take over from football. When you get to a certain age and you can't play football anymore, that you then start to play a bit more golf.
I feel like golf gets like this kind of like everybody that plays it's like older, but then I think it's like every sport, when people stop playing it, they go to play golf, like rugby, cricket, tennis, football, whatever. When you finish your career, it's like golf is like the easier of the sports for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, I can't
or
really claim
less
playing,
demanding on the body.
No, I can't really claim playing in the Worthing League was much of a career for football.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the point. I got to 39 and stopped playing. But I mean, I'm not. I love being out on the golf course. I'm not very good. But they would say a bad day on the golf course is better than a good day in the office.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that. I mean, everyone says about travelling as a goal. My son and I have applied for a race across the world.
Yeah.
I mean, thousands of people must apply. So
Yeah.
what the chance of us getting on, I don't know. But what an experience that would be. I mean,
Yeah.
it's we'd love to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think obviously I'm quite entrepreneurial, so everybody's different, but your goals are your own and bespoke to you, really. So for you, it's like getting this sustainable business that's got systems, operations, and the rest of it that allows you a bit more flexibility in your life, as opposed to somebody else's goal might be to grow their business to the point where they're not involved in the day-to-day, and they've probably got the same amount of time, but they have different types of stresses, because they've got the stresses about the wages. Where's the business going? Are we continuing to develop the business?
Are we still growing?
Are we still growing, as opposed to I'm quite comfortable with the systems we've got in place here. So definitely, and I'm a big advocate of like getting out and looking after yourself, and make sure you have some time for that, because you've got to look after yourself. Someone said to me once, if you can't look after yourself, then you can't look after anything else.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Health is wealth and all that kind of jazz. All in the same camp. Those kind of phrases. Okay, so some of the things that you think might kind of get in your way or be hurdles, you've put in here, always tough getting started, getting your name out there and attracting sufficient interest to ensure that you have enough work to continue so we can bring in some income whilst building your reputation. I think we've sort of covered that a little bit. I think just to touch on reputation, I do think that social media and stuff like that is a good way of you becoming that. I mean, we do this primarily. I love talking about businesses and to other business owners and all that kind of stuff. We do this all completely free of charge. There's nothing in there. The big benefit for me is exposure for myself. Like, as in, people were like, "Oh, I know Matt," and I'm not just Charles Cox, because I'm kind of known for that, if you like, outside of this podcast. But I've got other businesses that I run as well, so it's kind of like working on that, I think. And reputation-wise, if you perhaps the social media type space, I'm not suggesting yours is maybe akin to TikTok or whatever, but definitely your LinkedIn's and your other professionals.
Yeah, I've made quite an effort on LinkedIn in the first 2 or 3 months, as you might have seen.
And you can really churn them out now if you use in combination with things like ChatGPT and stuff like that. And people just like to see what's going on in people's lives, and LinkedIn's much more personal connection, which is what your business is about. It's kind of about you, Steve, the person. And I would say that probably no more than 2 posts a day on LinkedIn is a kind of. I think there's a study where they basically said it loses traction if you make more than 2 posts a day. In fact, the optimal is like a post every other day, really.
I tend to be 2 or 3 a week.
Yeah, so that's probably about perfect. But yeah, interesting stuff as well. Make sure people's faces are in them. Like, you see so many where they just like take a picture of a building, but actual humans in them get more interaction than just kind of blank photographs and stuff like that. So, but I think that will help you build your reputation. Case studies, all that kind of stuff, things that you can pull on. Interactive stuff as well, like we pinch stuff from architects all the time where they have those 3D models and the rest of it. They get a bit of engagement. People like that kind of stuff because it's it's fun to look at, isn't it? So
I've found so far that just by commenting on the journey for the business so far has been really useful, and that's actually got some really good engagement, and actually has led to 1 or 2 people, well, actually more than that, but quite a number of people connecting with me and contacting me as a result, and that's been that's an added bonus, if you like, because you don't necessarily expect for people to be connecting with you to say, actually, can I have a chat with you about X, Y, or
Yeah.
Z? But that's definitely been an added bonus for the last 2 or 3 posts that I've had some really good interaction with.
Yeah. Okay. And then you've got on the rest of your kind of challenges, you've got convincing potential clients that my service is one they need and will make their life easier. I think we've kind of touched on that and covered that.
Yep.
And then your next one is answering all the questions. So I know the form's fairly long, but you'll be surprised sometimes we have to stretch it out a little bit when we're talking to people.
Well, actually, I've changed this one because what I put on there is about balancing the business development and networking.
Yeah.
But actually, do you know what I think has been my third biggest challenge is which sole traders don't often acknowledge is loneliness. At times, being a sole trader can be lonely.
Yeah.
I spend quite a bit of time working at home. Now, okay, my business means I'm out and about a lot, and I'm, today, for example, I've had a meeting already. We're now recording the podcast, which is terrific. And tomorrow I've got a whole day of meetings. I'm going to be interacting with people, seeing people most of the day. But it's not like that every day. And actually, that's quite a challenge because when you sit at your laptop from 8 o'clock in the morning and you're still sitting there at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and you've only had your dog for company. It's that can be a bit of a challenge, and I don't think everyone always recognises that.
Yeah, it is a bit of a challenge, and also having your Zoom calls and Teams calls and all those kind of things, it still doesn't quite tick that box of actually. There's something about being present in a room with somebody. I know Teams and video calling in general, other ones available, are very useful, and they're very time saving as well. Not having to travel about places, but they are not the same as sitting face to face with people.
And I much prefer face to face meetings.
So loneliness is a problem. I suppose if the business grows, you might look at getting staff in, and that will deal with that. But I don't feel that that's necessarily on the immediate horizon, in terms of trying to get it to a nice, sustainable kind of lifestyle business.
But it's where the networking's helped.
Yeah.
And actually, making contacts through networking, and then just having some, not necessarily collaboration even, but just some connection with some of those contacts that you make through networking actually has been really helpful for me in the first 2 or 3 months because you get encouragement, you get advice, you get support, and you even get the odd, actually that doesn't look very good, maybe you should do this, so it's I found that really useful.
Exactly that. Networking and going out and meeting people obviously is going to sustain that or put that loneliness at bay, if you like. But it is incredibly lonely sometimes if you're all week long, you're stuck indoors and you've only got your dog or nobody even for company. You have to look after yourself and the rest of it. Get out on the golf course if you can do, and go and network, meet people, even if it's just pop in for a coffee. When it was just me on my own, I would do a little bit of block management for some letting agents or whatever, and I would make the point of just giving the keys that I had. I'd go in and I wouldn't just stick them in the letterbox. No, I'd make sure they were open. I'd go in and I'd be like, how's it going? Oh, you got any other work for me? And they'd be like, do you want a coffee? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. Yeah. Just because it broke up the day a bit and made sure it didn't go mad.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then like you mentioned about being part of the team, it then made them feel like I was an extension of but not a PAYE extension, so it wasn't a drain on the resources. Which is kind of similar where your business is. You're kind of part of what I would call like the wider power team, if you like, the consultants, the accountants, the surveyors, the kind of people that are not employed directly for you, but do lots of work for you. Yeah. Okay, so I think those sort of things are good. In terms of the challenges, I think we touched on some of them as well, getting that cash in and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like we've covered quite a lot of stuff. Was there anything else that you had on your list? I know you made lots of pen notes before you came and the rest of it, so just making sure we covered everything.
I was just making sure I had enough to talk to you about. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's been good to be able to talk about what the business is, and who might benefit from what I do, and again, that's part of, we met through networking, and so this opportunity wouldn't come my way if it wasn't for that. And if one or two people listen to this and think, actually, do you know what? Yeah, we might have a need for what Steve does, then terrific. And if nothing comes from it, but all it does, it just puts my name back out in front of a few people, then again, that's all good.
Exactly that. And you can take this footage as well and splice it up into your own little bits for LinkedIn or whatever you want to use on it. So you can recycle. But yeah, I think it will do good for that, and also it will help some people because when we talk about those cash flow things in, and it's just a reminder of those sort of models for people are good. Got to put the hard work in and get them set up and the rest of it. But there's so many people have this feast and famine or peaks and troughs in their businesses, and they're fine if they've got a big cash reserve, but sometimes it's quite hard to have a cash reserve, especially when you're kind of on your own and the money that comes in is the money that gets spent essentially normally.
Well, especially if I moved house at the same time as starting
Yes.
a business. So moving house and starting a business at the same time.
Yeah, and they're not too cheap.
How much stress do you need in your life at any one
exactly,
time?
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, it's been lovely having you on, Steve.
Thanks, Matt.
What we'd really like to do is have you on in about a year's time, see where you're at, see if you've kind of ticked any of those goals, any more hurdles, that kind of stuff. So we'd love to have you back on. But yeah, in the meantime, wish you all the best with everything. I'm sure it will be fine, and hopefully good advice and nice chat today.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much.
No worries.